host for HFK Presents 5 Minutes of History. I have to apologize for there's a flurry of activity in the studios today. We're all very excited because in keeping with the presidential theme, we have a very special guest in our studios today. The 26th President of the United States of America, Theodore Roosevelt, the very first president to receive the Nobel Prize for Peace. So without any further ado, allow me to introduce to you Theodore Roosevelt. Mr. President, if you could, would you please explain to everyone how you received the Nobel Prize for Peace?
Delighted! It would be my pleasure. You see, back in 1906, the nations of the world were very concerned with the conflict between Russia and Japan. This war was escalating at great numbers, and they were concerned with the welfare of the rest of the nations. Now, some nation had to step in and be the mediator to settle a peace treaty between those two nations. Well, that usually would go to someone like Great Britain or perhaps maybe France. The problem being both nations had their own interests in those two other nations at conflict. So it was out of the question. They could not be impartial mediators. And of course, no one wanted Germany's Kaiser to rule a decision on this nature. So it fell to none other than the United States of America, a new emerging superpower nation itself. This job would usually be entitled to the Secretary of State, but my secretary, Secretary Hay, unfortunately had passed away. So I took the mantle and decided to lead the charge in settling this dispute between these two great nations. I invited diplomats from both nations to come to meet me in the White House itself, thinking the impression of the White House, so to say, would be enough to get them to listen and settle with me in accord. This was not to be. They found ways to avoid each other at every turn, so I decided we must get them into a smaller confines, so to say. And I kept finding smaller and smaller locations for them to meet, trying to keep them within the same building. It didn't work. They would not stay on solid ground level with each other. So I took them off the ground, so to say. I put them at sea. I decided that what we would do was negotiate on the presidential yacht, the Mayflower. Yes, that is where I took them. We had several meetings there, individually with both nations, and then combined them together, instructing the captains that they were not to return until a peace treaty was decided. I spent my time away from the ship, visiting on occasion, and eventually those confines together caused them to finally want to get back to shore, so to say, and a peace treaty was negotiated. We set into the harbor at Portsmouth and signed the agreement, ending the Russo-Japanese War and giving me the distinction of becoming the first president of the United States to receive the Nobel Prize for Peace. Back to you, Mr. Lynch.
That was a bully of a story, Mr. President. I wish we had more time, but we're just about out of time. Speaking of time, it's time for trivia. Mr. President, would you do us the honor?
It would be my pleasure. You know, Terry, I'm known for many things. A great president, a rough rider, so to say, but one thing I don't think people are too sure of is the fact that I'm also a great ad man, coming up with slogans, so to say. And the best example of this would be, back in 1907, I was stopping at a hotel in Nashville, Tennessee. It's as though it were just yesterday. We had a wonderful meal there, and I had the most spectacular cup of coffee I had ever ingested in my entire life. And I asked for a second cup because it was so delicious. When I finished that cup, I put it down and said, "My goodness sakes alive! That coffee is good to the last drop." Well, the owners of the Maxwell House Hotel took that slogan and ran with it, so to say. And the next time you go to the store looking for a cup of Maxwell House coffee, think of me, Teddy Roosevelt, the one who termed that.
Thank you again, Mr. President. Hopefully we'll be able to have you back again in the future. Speaking of which, if you have a question for President Roosevelt, feel free to email that question to me at info@hfkpresents.com. And I'm sure Mr. Roosevelt will be more than happy to come back and answer that question for you in a later webcast. But until then, I'll leave you with this. My next webcast has to do with this question. Who was the first gentleman caller with presidential aspirations from the state of Illinois to have a desire also to marry Mary Todd? You'll be surprised. The answer is not who you think it is. So until then, if you want to find out when our next broadcast date is, check out Facebook or our blogs. I'm your host, Terry Lynch, telling you to watch out. History happens when you don't expect it.